All right, let me see here. This is gonna be maybe the first, probably not the last video in a series of energy subjects and energy topics. And in today's video, I want to talk a little bit more about an email I wrote and also some thoughts I've had lately. Namely, about why you should drop people out of your life and steer away from people who are poor. Now, first and foremost, poor in this context doesn't necessarily mean people who don't have money, although that's a large part of it. See, you can only tolerate people who have little money as much. Meaning, if you have a friend, let's call him Billy, and Billy never can afford to go out, Billy can never afford to go anywhere, Billy hardly can pay his bills, and Billy doesn't have a well-paid job or can't really do anything but just pay his bills and his food, and that's it. Billy's living a crappy life. Now, if Billy works hard and Billy really wants to improve his life and get a better paid job and also perhaps work a little bit on the side or get a second job so that he can actually afford to save some money aside and, perhaps be able to afford to go out every once in a while, then sure, that's a different thing. If he's working hard on bettering his situation. But if he's not, and if he starts complaining, and if he pursues the victimhood mentality, then Billy is the sort of low energy and low quality people that you should avoid at all costs, including if these are your friends, and also including if these are your relatives. Yes, I'm dead serious here. Just because they're your family, just because you've known them for so many years, just because they say they love you or they say they care about you, but they're a constant pain in the butt. They don't do anything to better their situation. They're blaming everyone and everything else for their awful and horrible state. And steer away from them. Because you don't owe them anything. You don't owe the world nothing. In fact, I want to quote a book, which I read it for a couple of years ago, or a couple of years ago actually, more than a couple of years. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. This is a book called "When I Say No, I Feel Guilty." It's a great book, and I'm actually gonna read it again because I read the Kindle version, but now I've ordered the hardcover version, which is supposed to show up in my mailbox soon, hopefully. Anyway, I'm butchering the quote, but in the beginning of "When I Say No, I Feel Guilty." By the way, just listen to the title. When I say no, I feel guilty, because that's what they want. They want you to feel guilty when you say no. They want you to feel guilty when you reject them. Those are the sort of energy thieves and vampires and low quality people that you're better off staying away from as far as much as possible, at all times, at all costs, may I add. Anyway, just another sip of water. In the beginning of that book, it says something along the lines of, you are born as a free and sovereign individual with the right to say no to anything that you don't want to do, or some such. Just think about that. You have the right to say no to something that you don't want to do. Now, just a quick disclaimer. If you're a minor and you have a parent to obey, that's a different thing. You have to obey your parents, right? And if the law in your jurisdiction, your country, dictates that you have to do something, you have to comply, right? Now, most viewers, if not all viewers of this channel and of these videos are responsible adults. And they're gonna understand that, of course, anything that's legal or any legal stuff, you have to comply with it. So that's fine. In that sense, you have to sometimes say yes, although you want to say no. But by and large, and especially when it comes to human relationships, you have the option and you have the right, and may I add, polite as well, to say no. And you should be able to say no without feeling guilty. Just judge people by their reactions when you say no and see how they react. Do they want to make you feel bad? That's a great way of filtering out the low quality people, the dirt, and the filth. That's a great way to de-weeding the garden that is your human relations. Get them out. Get the weeds and the shrubberies out, because they have nothing to do in your life. You want the roses. You want the tulips. You want the pretty flowers, right? You don't want the weeds. You don't want the shrubs. They don't belong in your garden. They're ugly, right? They're the ugly plants, the ugly ducklings. And they're only going to decrease the the quality of your life. I'm going to give you an example of something that I potentially, or I'm going to give you an example of an interaction that could potentially have gone down the wrong road. And I'm going to explain as to why it wasn't even an interaction. It was me declining an invitation to an interaction. And I'm going to explain to you why and how. So here's the plot. I was walking down the street. I was fully focused on going to a particular place because I needed to be there, and I was kind of rushing it. I had a very determined look in my face. As I was walking, some guy was approaching me from about 50 yards or so, maybe 30 yards. And he said, "Hey, hey." He didn't say, "Hey, excuse me." He said, "Hey, hey," just half shouting at me. When people are doing that, and especially if I'm in a rush, in a hurry, I tend to don't respond because I don't like people to disrupt my rhythm. So I kept on walking. And in most cases, people disengage when I don't even respond, or when they're not getting a response. But not this guy. This guy, you want to know what he did? He actually kept on yelling, and he kept on yelling even louder. He said, "Hey, hey," and I just kept on walking, and he started shouting even louder, "Hey, hey!" And for a brief millisecond, I pondered whether I should stop and just look him in the eyes and give him a look that said, "Hey, dude, what's wrong with you?" But I didn't. I just kept on walking. And I don't know if this guy was deranged or mentally challenged or some such. It doesn't really matter. What matters is I didn't like the interaction, or I didn't like the way he was approaching me. And people who are of a lower grade, people who are of a lower quality, people who oftentimes run you over and dictate the pace of your life, a lot of times they behave like this. And you don't need to engage with them. In fact, you have the right and the plight to say no to interactions that you don't want. And especially, and this is perhaps particular to me, but whenever people are yelling and shouting in this particular manner, I'm backing off because I don't want that sort of bad energy. These are the same kind of people who fidget, who react quickly, and who really can't for lack of a better word, I'm going to say these are people who really can't accept that there are circumstances beyond their control sometimes. And I'm struggling to find the wording, especially for when there are people, or there are rules which apply as set forth by mostly the government or the state that they can't do anything about. And these people assume that they can change everything, including said rules. That's not how things work. Things work by you taking a responsibility of your actions. If you're poor, you go make more money. If you're fat and lazy, you go train. If you don't have any friends, you go out and talk to people. But you don't shout and yell and vent and moan in their faces. And yeah, that's that, really. There was something else I wanted to talk about, but I didn't. No. I'm slowly forgetting the things I wanted to say, so I think I'll just end it right here, actually. Stay away from the people who want to disrupt your rhythm, because it's only going to end up bad for you. And if you want to learn more, if you want to learn more about energy and how to pick people who are right for you and with whom you vibe better. Excuse me. That was the worst. I think that was the worst introduction I've ever done, because I had something in my in my throat. Anyway, if you want to learn more about energy, if you want to learn more about people who you want to be around, and you want to filter out the dirt and the filth from your life, then go check out my email list. The link to do so is in the episode description below this video, and I shall see you there.